Hello family and welcome back. So get ready to learn how to draft, pattern and stitch this elegant pencil dress with puff sleeves and a stylish collar. If it's your first time interacting with this channel, kindly don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more sewing tutorials. Before we begin, let's gather materials needed. We'll be using this orange heavyweight stretchy fabric for collar part and sleeves. With me is another hot pink fabric, also heavy in weight for the dress part, about 1.5 yards. So guys, the first step of creating this dress involves folding the fabric in a manner that I'm able to cut both front and back parts all at once. This inner side is its wrong side, and after folding it into two like that, we'll fold again the second time so that at the top edge is shoulder line and the zipper allowance right there. Alright, let's now take vertical measurements, starting with shoulder line to bust line at 10 inches. Next is shoulder line to waistline at 15.5 inches. And for hip line, I'll measure 10 inches from waistline and mark. And I'm going to repeat all the measurements on side in order to achieve straight horizontal lines. After which, I'll use a ruler in squaring out lines across marked points. That being so, we'll go ahead and label each of the drawn lines as hip line, waistline, and lastly bust line right there. For the dress full length, I'll measure from waistline that was marked earlier at 15.5 inches to 43 inches plus 2 inches folding allowance. Again, let's measure that twice for a straight horizontal line. Bear in mind that the fold is the center front, which is why I'll measure normal neckline 3 inches neck width by 3 inches neck depth from it. After doing so, we'll draw a smooth neckline in that manner using a French curve ruler. Let's move on to taking half shoulder measurement on shoulder line from center front steel, which in my case is 6.5 plus 0.5 inches stitching allowance, and having marked at 7 inches, go down by 0.5 inches only because we are working on actual fabric for shoulder slope. Then align right from neck width to it. Time to move on to marking chest line from shoulder slope. Use the formula on screen to know where your chest line lies. Once done, go ahead and draw chest line across the mark and label it as chest line. Now that we have chest line drawn, carry forward half shoulder measurement marked on chest line just so we can easily draw a straight armhole depth joined to shoulder slope as can be seen. And further on, find armhole depth midpoint and mark. Having marked, go in by 0.5 inches from that exact point. And lastly, mark quarter bar circumference on chest line, which is basically best measurement divided by 4. Then use a curved ruler as an extra support to draw a smooth armhole curve. I'm saying so because it can be drawn freehand in case you don't have a curved ruler. With armhole curve drawn, it's time to mark half bust span on waistline from center front. Also mark the same on bust line, just so you can draw that line running from bust line all the way to the hip line. And given that, measure 4 inches on that line from hip line and further 1 inch down from bust line on that line still. When done, measure 0.5 inches on each side of that line. So that's all you'll use to draw a normal dart as you're about to see. Once that is completed, measure quarter waist circumference on waistline plus 1 inch dart replacement. And since this fabric is a stretchy one, we'll only add 1 inch more stitching allowance. Quarter bar circumference is already marked on chest line. What is left is just adding 1 inch stitching allowance. And given these points, let's draw bodice outline with a line from the mark on chest line to that on waistline. Next, we'll be focusing on the dress cut part by first measuring quarter hip circumference on hip line, and take note that so far all the measurements have been taken from the center front. After doing so, add 1 inch stitching allowance as well. On the full length line, for a slim person, 7 inches is enough if you want a slim fit dress, plus 1 inch stitching allowance. And with all that measured and marked, we'll go in with rulers to finish up skirt part outline as shown. Here I'm cutting out a long dress outline. And I forgot to measure that the back and the front armholes are not in the same shapes. So first, I'll cut along the outer straight line, then later along the front armhole. It's equally important to take note that the back part neckline shouldn't be deep, and for that reason, I'll use 1 inch neck depth as the width is maintained. Then I'll go ahead and draw back part neckline. after which I'll cut out the back neckline first, then the front part separately. Let's also cut out along the front part armhole separately. Next up, we'll trace out front center line on the back pieces from neckline part all the way to the bottom edge. Here is key technique I use when I want to copy dots on fabric underneath. Use a pair of scissors and press on the 4 main parts of the drawn dart, then flip and paste on the rest of the pieces just as I'm showing you. On top of that, let's do some waist snatching at the back to reduce zip bulge. Measure 0.5 inches inwards on waistline, then use a ruler to draw lines as you're about to see. Once done, you need to reduce allowance to the same shape, after which you'll be required to cut along the second line. Time to move on to having the front neckline shape in a certain type of way. Pay attention to how I'm doing that. And just to clarify, on the shorter side is 5 inches, while on the longer side is 8.5 inches. So now we'll cut out along the new drawn neckline. And with the fabric cut, I'll show you how to attach these facing pieces I cut off camera to fabrics for front and the back parts. You'll only stitch along here with about 0.25 inches for both, leaving the other openings free. Secondly, it will be easy to stitch darts through having marked earlier. I didn't have enough fabric to use as facing, that's why it's joined from here. So just stitch on side edges, leaving other openings free, and further on also stitch darts on both sides. This is me showing you how to attach front facing to fabric, and you'll see later how to stitch darts as well. Also me attaching back facing to back piece from center line with 0.25 inches, but in this I'll again top stitch on facing to allow easy folding before working on darts for the 2 back pieces. The work has been completed, and as you can see, went ahead and ironed darts facing each other. It's important to always do that after making darts. And like I said, haven't stitched on necklines and armholes. I did the same on back pieces as well, including stitching of darts. In this next step, I want to show you how to join back shoulders to front. Pay close attention as I pin down fabric separately. That being so, hold facings together, putting right sides facing each other, then stitch separately with 0.5 inches on both sides. After joining them, iron seams spread flat as I've done. So now we'll take measurements on the shorter side of the neckline, leaving out 1 inch for zip allowance. Mine is 8.5 inches. Then I'll also take measurement on the neckline's longer side from the notch, which are found to be 12.5 inches. Guys, these are the collar pieces to be stitched on neckline. Shorter side of each is about 4 inches, inclusive of 0.5 inches stitching allowance. Stay tuned as I demonstrate how to attach them to neckline. First step being turning neckline inside out like that, if you understand what I mean. What you do next is inserting first collar piece inside between fabric and facing, as you ensure its edge is aligned to the neckline's V part. Having achieved an alignment, pin down from that end to the other. It's important to leave 1 inch zip allowance not attached to the collar as you stitch with 0.5 inches all the way to the other end. Same process is to be repeated when pinning down the second collar piece on the left side of the neckline. Here is the end result after taking my time and stitching on the pinned area. Let's move on to stitching loosely on the zipper space from neckline to the mark. After back stitching on each, proceed to using small normal stitches, then back stitch again, and lastly loosely stitch on the slit space. I've done exactly as I explained, so now I'm also going to stitch on sides using body measurements for both. I already love what I see, look at that guys. Okay, let's tear out the zipper space allowance which was loosely stitched so that it will be easy to measure the total armhole, just so we are able to use the measurement in drafting puff sleeve. Here is a 3/4 pattern. If you're not sure how to draft this, I'll leave a link in the description, kindly check it out. In drafting puff sleeve, start by drawing some lines as can be seen. And with lines drawn, go ahead and cut along them. Here I'm labeling them as 1, 2, 3 and 4 to avoid confusion. This next step involves arranging them one by one on the sleeve fabric, following their numbers as I pin down. I'm also going to be measuring about 3 inches in between, like that, from the first piece to the last one. Once I'm done pinning, I'll cut out the bottom edge in dome shape by doing that. Later we'll cut out along the new drawn edge first, then on the side, and lastly along the top edge too, in that order. After doing so, we'll further measure 2.5 inches from where I'll draw another tiny curve, then I'll cut out along the drawn curve. Moving forward, I'll make some loose stitches along the bottom edge, then at the top too. Here are the sleeve pieces with gathers made on them. So now we'll use one of them to demonstrate how gathers is formed by pulling one of the strings from one end gently and steadily until it's all gathered in the required measurement. Same will apply on the other edge. With me are 2 sets of pieces, shorter and longer ones. Purpose for this shorter one is this. We'll head over to the sewing machine and bind them on the tiny curve cut earlier at the center. Then the longer ones are to be used as binding on the side edges. If my explanation here ain't clear enough, you'll see what I mean. This is it, guys. After binding curve part using the shorter piece, I stitched the longer ones on side and they are to be tied at the middle. Now that the sleeves have been made, let's fix them to armholes by first spreading seams flat around the armpit area. Then go ahead and stitch with about 0.5 inches all round. When done with that, you need to fix a zipper on the zipper space, and lastly just double hem all round the dress bottom edge. Here is the final look, guys. At this point, what is left is ironing seams and joints flat. Kindly comment down in the comment section what you think of this stunning dress with collar, and don't forget to subscribe if it's your first time here. Let's meet in our next tutorial.